The station's security AI flagged human blanket as critical infrastructure. At 300 hours and I've been filing incident reports ever since. Let me back up. I'm Cash, been running security on Station 41 for 12 cycles now. Seen everything: contraband smuggling, reactor malfunctions. That one time, a cargo bay depressurized because someone thought airlock warnings were suggestions. I've handled it all with exactly 3 disciplinary citations on my record. Thank you very much. Then we got a human. Her name was Gemma. Wedding planner, of all the useless professions to send to a deep space station. What were we supposed to do with someone whose entire job was making sure flowers matched napkins? But the interspecies exchange program didn't ask for my opinion. So Gemma arrived on a supply transport, smiled at everyone like we were all getting married, and moved into quarters on deck 7. I figured she'd be harmless. Humans were weird but generally predictable. They fix things they shouldn't be able to fix, ate foods that would kill most species, and had an alarming fondness for adopting anything with eyes. Standard human behavior. I could handle that. Then we rescued the cubs. Let me tell you about these cubs. 17 of them pulled from a damaged freighter that had been using them as well cargo. They were predator stock VIN species, 4 legs, retractable claws, enough teeth to make my own fangs look decorative. Their species doesn't develop pack behavior until adulthood. Cubs are supposed to be solitary, aggressive, barely social. We stuck them in the rescue facility, gave them food and space, called it a day. They spent 2 weeks hissing at each other. Then Gemma started volunteering at the facility. I should have paid attention to that. I should have noticed when the cubs stopped hissing. I should have questioned why the facility supervisor stopped filing noise complaints, but I was busy. We had a shipment of volatile plasma cores coming in, and some genius had labeled them as decorative crystals, so I was dealing with that nightmare. I wasn't paying attention to the cubs. That was my first mistake. My second mistake was assuming the security AI was malfunctioning when it woke me up at Oro. 300 hours with a priority alert. Critical infrastructure breach on deck. 7. The AI announced in my quarters. Unauthorized political entity has established territorial claim. Immediate response required. I dragged myself out of sleep and checked the alert details. Deck 7, Gemma's quarters, political entity. AI run diagnostics. I said you're glitching. Diagnostics complete. All systems functioning normally. Alert. Status remains critical. Unauthorized. Government has declared protected sovereign territory in residential section. Security response requested. I pulled on my uniform and grabbed my comm unit. Whatever was happening, it was going to be stupid. It was always stupid at 300 hours. Jack, I called my junior officer. Meet me at the humans' quarters. Apparently, we have a political situation. Sir Jack sounded as confused as I felt. It's 300, I'm aware. Move. I headed to Deck 7, expecting to find Gemma doing something typically human. Maybe she'd reorganized her quarters, and the AI was confused by her furniture arrangement. Maybe she'd hung up territorial-looking decorations. Humans loved decorations. They put them on everything. I did not expect to find 17 cubs forming a defensive perimeter around her door. They were arranged in a perfect Semicircle. 3 rows deep, the larger cubs in front, smaller ones behind, all of them facing outward with their ears pinned back and their tails low. Classic defensive formation. Except these cubs weren't supposed to know what a defensive formation was. Jackster arrived beside me and stopped. Sir, those are the rescue cubs. I can see that they're not supposed to leave the facility. They're definitely not supposed to be on residential decks. I'm aware. I activated my comm. Facility supervisor, this is Cash. Why are your cubs on deck 7? Silence. Supervisor. Respond. More silence. Sir, Jackster said quietly. They're staring at us. They were 17 pairs of eyes locked on us with an intensity that made my scales itch. Not aggressive, not frightened, just watching, waiting. I took a step forward. Every single cub shifted, not much, just enough to tighten their formation. Their message was clear. We weren't getting past them. AI, I said, explain the political entity. Classification. Entity displays organized hierarchy, territorial defense patterns, coordinated resource protection, and communication protocols consistent with recognized governmental structures. Classification upgraded from fauna to political organization at 2:47 hours. Their cubs, they can't form governments. Observation contradicts assessment. Entity has established clear leadership, structure, rotation schedules, and mutual defense agreements. These behaviors exceed threshold requirements for political recognition under Clear's Throat Station Charter Article 12 Section 4. I stared at the cubs. They stared back. What are they protecting? The sacred rest primary designation. Thermal comfort textile belonging to human Gemma. The what blanket human term item located inside quarters designated as critical cultural artifact by defending entity. This was insane. I was standing in a corridor at 300 hours being told that a group of cubs had formed a government to protect a blanket. Open the door. I told the AI, unable to comply. Entity has filed formal territorial claim. Unauthorized entry constitutes invasion under Article 12. Section 8. Its crew quarters on my station. Open the door. Legal review in progress. Please stand by. Jackster looked at me. Sir, what do we do? Good question. The cubs weren't being aggressive. They weren't damaging anything. They were just sitting there. Organized, disciplined, completely impossible. I tried the reasonable approach. You need to return to the facility. This area is not authorized for fauna. The largest cub, sitting front and center, tilted its head. Then it made a sound. Not a growl, not a hiss, something else. Complicated, almost like language. Other cubs responded, same kind of sound, different pitches. They were communicating. Jackster, tell me you're recording this. Yes, sir. Should I call xenoxicology? Yes, wake up Thewin. Tell them we have a situation. The door to Gemma's quarters opened. She stood there in sleeping clothes, hair disorganized, looking confused and irritated in that special way humans looked when you interrupted their rest. Kibben, it's 3:00 in the morning. What's wrong? Your quarters are surrounded by cubs. She looked down at the defensive formation. Oh yeah, they do that sometimes. They do that sometimes, I repeated. They get nightmares. The facility supervisor said I could let them sleep in the corridor if they needed to. I put my blanket by the door, and they curl up around it. Helps them feel safe. She said this like it was normal, like it explained everything. Gemma, they've formed a government. They've formed a what? The station AI has classified them as a political entity. They've declared your blanket sovereign territory. She blinked, then she looked at the cubs, then back at me. That's ridiculous. They're just scared. They're babies. Babies don't organize defensive perimeters with leadership hierarchies and rotation schedules. Rotation schedules. The AI detected pattern changes. They're taking shifts. That big one in front, he's been there for 2 hours. Before him, it was the one with the torn ear. They're rotating guard duty. Gemma stared at the cubs. The cubs stared back at her with what I can only describe as devotion. I just wanted them to sleep better, she said. Well, congratulations. You've created a political crisis with betting. She crouched down, reaching toward the nearest cub. It leaned into her hand, making a sound that was almost a purr. Hey guys, you need to go back to the facility. Kibben is worried. None of them moved. Come on back to your rooms. The large cub made that complicated sound again. The others responded. They weren't moving. Gemma, I said carefully, try to take the blanket. What? Just pick it up, bring it inside. She shrugged and reached for the blanket. It was right there by the door. Exactly like she'd said, thermal fabric. Worn edges, completely unremarkable. Except for the 17 cubs treating it like a religious artifact. The moment her hand touched it, every cub tensed. It's okay, Gemma said, it's my blanket. I'm just moving it. She picked it up. The cubs exploded into sound, not aggressive, not attacking, but loud. So loud, a chorus of distress that brought 3 more crew members stumbling into the corridor in various states of undress. Gemma immediately put the blanket back down. The cubs went silent. They won't let you take it, I said. It's my blanket, not according to them. She looked at the cubs. They looked back with those same devoted eyes. This is crazy. You're being crazy. It's just fabric. The large cub placed one paw on the blanket, deliberate, possessive. The message was clear. The blanket stayed. Sir Jack's Tor said Thielwyn is on the way, and other cubs from the facility are asking where their packmates went. Their what packmates? The supervisor says the remaining cubs are distressed. They're asking, and I'm quoting here, where the guardians went. Sir, I don't think cubs are supposed to have language. They're not. Thielwyn arrived, took one look at the situation and started laughing. Not helpful. Oh, this is magnificent. Kimnak, do you have any idea what you're looking at? Cubs with a blanket fixation. Cubs displaying pack bonding, abstract reasoning, symbolic thinking, and organizational behavior. This shouldn't be possible. Their neural development isn't mature enough. They shouldn't have the cognitive capacity for any of this. And yet, Thielwyn moved closer. Slowly, carefully. The cubs watched but didn't react. Defensively. Gemma, what exactly have you been doing with these cubs? Nothing, they have bad dreams. The supervisor said. Their species experiences trauma responses but doesn't have social comfort mechanisms. I let them sleep near my door, that's all. With the blanket, well, yes, I put the blanket down so they'd have something soft. Thielwyn crouched, examining the defensive formation, and they organized around it. Made it a focal point, security anchor, physical representation of safety. They looked up at me. She accidentally created a cultural foundation object. A what? Think of it like a flag, a constitution, a sacred text. She gave them something that represents safety, and they built their entire social structure around protecting it. It's brilliant. It's unprecedented. It's completely impossible. The Cubs continued watching us, still organized, still disciplined, still very much not moving. So what do? I asked. I have absolutely no idea. Thewin said cheerfully, this has never happened before. There's no protocol for fauna spontaneously developing civilization around bedding. My comm unit chirped, Station AI. Security Chief Kim Nash, please be advised, 12 additional Cubs have left the facility and are en route to Deck 7. Their stated purpose, translated from non-standard vocalizations, is to join the Guard. Also, Chairman Velmuth requests immediate briefing on the political entity situation. I looked at Gemma. She looked back with those big human eyes full of confusion and innocence. You, I said, are going to be the death of my career. I just wanted them to feel safe, she said. The Cubs made their complicated sounds again, more of them. Now harmonizing, it sounded almost like singing, and down the corridor I could hear the approaching footsteps of 12 more Cubs coming to join their revolution. All because of a blanket. Let me understand this correctly, Thelen said, walking in slow circles around the Cubs. You're telling me they won't leave the blanket? They won't let anyone take the blanket, and they're treating it as what? A monument? That's what I'm telling you, I said. The 12 additional Cubs had arrived and integrated seamlessly into the formation. 29 Cubs now. 29 Cubs with a unified purpose and a defensive strategy that would make military tacticians jealous. Gemma sat on the floor near her doorway, looking exhausted. Can I at least go back to sleep? No, I said. You're the keeper of the sacred blanket. You're involved. I'm a wedding planner. I plan centerpieces and seating charts. I don't do whatever this is. You created a political movement with thermal fabric. You're doing exactly this. Thewin pulled out a scanner and started taking readings. The Cubs allowed it, which was notable. They weren't aggressive toward anyone who didn't threaten the blanket. They were just immovable. Their neural patterns are fascinating. Thewin muttered, look at this synchronization. They're thinking collectively, not quite hive mind, but close, coordinated consciousness with individual awareness. This shouldn't develop for another 6 seasons of growth. Can you make them leave? I asked. Make them cash. They're sentient beings with organized social structure. I can't make them do anything. That would be a rights violation. They're Cubs. They're Cubs with a government. The AI classified them as political entity. That means they have legal standing under station charter. I wanted to throw my comm unit at something. This is insane. This is unprecedented, Thewin corrected. Also insane, yes, but mostly unprecedented. Jackster approached carefully, holding a container of food. Sir, I brought nutrition supplements from the facility. Maybe we can bribe them. Good thinking. Cubs were motivated by food. Everyone knew that. Basic biology. Jacker opened the container. High protein paste formulated specifically for growing predators. The Cubs loved this stuff. I'd seen them fight over it during feeding times. Not one of them moved. Jack waved the container Come on, food, you like food. The large cub in front, the one I was mentally calling the leader, turned its head slightly, acknowledged the food, then turned back to watching the corridor. They're ignoring food, Jack said, sir. Cubs don't ignore food, these cubs do. Apparently, Gemma sighed, they ate earlier before they came here. They're not hungry. How do you know when they ate? I checked the facility logs. I like to know if they're eating properly. Of course she did, because humans couldn't just let things be. They had to care about everything. Thielwyn was still scanning. Kimnesh, look at this hierarchy structure. See how the larger cubs form outer defense and smaller ones stay protected in back. That's sophisticated tactical thinking. And this one here, second row, keeps looking at the others. Communication relay. They've established a command structure. In 2 weeks, well, technically in however long Gemma's been doing this blanket thing, 3 nights, Gemma said. They started coming to my door 3 nights ago. 3 nights. They'd organized a civilization in 3 nights. Gemma, I said slowly, what exactly happens during these nights? She shrugged. They scratch at my door. I open it. They look scared, so I put the blanket down and they curl up around it. They calm down. They sleep. Morning comes. They go back to the facility. Do you talk to them? Sometimes I tell them they're safe, that nothing's going to hurt them. Standard comfort phrases. In what language? Common. They don't understand it, but tone matters, right? Thielwyn made a noise that might have been laughter or horror. She's been giving them verbal reassurance paired with physical security anchor, classical conditioning combined with emotional bonding. She's essentially been teaching them that the blanket represents safety and protection. I was just being nice. Gemma protested. You were being human, I said, which means you were ignoring several dozen safety protocols and accidentally creating sapient life. My comm chirped. Again, Chairman Velmuth, fantastic. Kimnesh, my office now, sir. I'm managing a situation. The situation is now a diplomatic incident. The cubs have filed a formal territorial claim. Legal department is having breakdowns. Move. I looked at Thielwyn. Keep them contained. Don't let this get worse. How could it get worse? Famous last words. I left Jackster and Thielwyn with the cubs and headed to the chairman's office. When I arrived, I found 3 legal specialists arguing with each other, and Velmuth looking like they wanted to retire immediately. Explain, Velmuth said. I explained. The blanket, the cubs, the defensive formation, the government classification, all of it. Velmuth stared at me. A blanket? Yes, sir. The cubs formed a nation over a blanket. Appears that way, sir. And the human just gave them the blanket. She was trying to help them sleep. One of the legal specialists spoke up. Chairman, the problem is the AI classification. Once an entity is recognized as political organization, they have rights, territory claims, cultural protection, autonomous governance. We can't just remove them without negotiation. They're cubs, Velmuth said. They're organized cubs with documented social structure and mutual defense agreements. Legally, that's government. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever dealt with, Velmuth said, and I once had to mediate a trade dispute over decorative moss. My comm chirped. Jax. Tor, sir, you need to come back now. What happened? Gemma tried to wash the blanket. I ran. When I got back to deck, 7. The corridor clear's throat was full of sound, not aggressive, worse. Mournful. 29. Cubs making a noise that sounded like grief and betrayal and heartbreak all mixed together. Gemma stood in her doorway holding the blanket, looking horrified. I just wanted to clean it. It smelled. Put it back, I said, but it's dirty. Put it back. She placed the blanket on the floor. The cubs immediately swarmed it, checking it, sniffing it, making distressed sounds. The large one looked at Gemma with what I can only describe as accusation. They think I heard it, Gemma said quietly, don't they? You moved their sacred object without permission, Elwyn said. From their perspective, you attempted desecration. It's a blanket, it needs washing. That's basic hygiene. It's their cultural foundation. You can't just clean cultural foundations. Gemma sat down hard. This is insane. I was trying to help. The cubs gradually calmed, but they'd reorganized. Now they had cubs positioned between Gemma and the blanket, not aggressive, just protective. They decided she was a threat. Sir, Jackster said, the facility supervisor is reporting more cubs requesting departure. They want to join, and I'm quoting the sacred guard. How many more? All of them. 43 cubs total in facility. Absolutely not. We are not having 72 cubs forming a nation on deck 7. Sir, they're requesting formal asylum. They're claiming they're being separated from their pack. I looked at Thielwyn. Cubs don't have packs. These cubs do. Gemma created one accidentally, and now they're organizing on species-wide scale. My comm chirped, Station AI. Security Chief Kim Nash, please be advised. The defending entity has constructed preliminary fortifications using available materials. Also, human Gemma's quarters have been reclassified as embassy territory, pending legal review. What fortifications? Please observe corridor section 7 Delta. I looked. The cubs had been busy. They dragged containers from somewhere, arranged them in defensive positions, created an actual perimeter. When did they do this? I asked. During blanket desecration incident. Entity utilized distraction to establish strategic infrastructure. They'd planned it, used Gemma's washing attempt as cover. These cubs were thinking 3 moves ahead. Thielwyn, I said, how intelligent are they? By my readings, approaching sentient baseline. Their problem solving, planning, organizing. This is happening in real time. They're evolving consciousness around the blanket. That's not how evolution works. Tell them that. The cubs had settled back into formation, tighter now, more defensive. They'd learned that threats could come from anywhere, even from the keeper, and Gemma sat there looking miserable because she'd only wanted to help, and instead she created the most bizarre diplomatic crisis in station history. Sir, Jackster said quietly, what do we do? I looked at the cubs, at the blanket, at Gemma, at this entire impossible situation. I have no idea, I admitted, but Chairman Velmuth is going to want answers, and I didn't have any. The emergency council meeting happened at 600 hours because apparently nobody believed in sleep anymore. Chairman Velmuth sat at the head of the table, flanked by legal specialists, station administrators, and various department heads who all looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I stood at attention, preparing to defend decisions I barely understood myself. Gemma stood beside me, still in her sleeping clothes because I hadn't given Her time to change, the cubs had allowed her to leave only after she'd promised to return, promised to cubs who understood promises now, apparently. Let me make sure I understand the situation, Veloth said. In 3 days, our human wedding planner has accidentally created a political entity, triggered sapient development in a species that shouldn't possess it, and turned residential quarters into disputed territory. Do I have that correct? Yes, sir, I said. And the root cause is bedding. Thermal comfort textile, sir, but yes. Veloth looked at Gemma. Explain your reasoning. Gemma straightened. They were having nightmares. Their species was traumatized by captivity. The facility supervisor said they don't have social comfort mechanisms, so they just suffer alone. I thought if they had somewhere safe to sleep, somewhere soft and warm, they might rest better. I wasn't trying to create anything. I just wanted them to feel safe. By giving them your blanket, I have 3 blankets. I only need 1. One of the legal specialists spoke up. The problem, Chairman, is that her action has triggered unprecedented cognitive development. The cubs have formed what can only be described as a proto-civilization with the blanket as their central cultural artifact. Removing it now could cause psychological collapse across the entire rescued population. We have 72 cubs in our facility, another administrator said. If they all start acting like this, we won't have space. We won't have resources. We won't have personnel trained to handle sentient beings who legally we classified as fauna. Reclassify them, Gemma said. Everyone looked at her. If they're sentient, treat them like sentient beings. Give them space. Give them autonomy. Stop calling them fauna. It's not that simple, Velmuth said. Classification requires cognitive testing, developmental assessment, cultural evaluation. It takes months. They formed a government in 3 days. How much more proof do you need? Fair point. Actually, Thielwen entered the meeting, moving quickly. Chairman, I have preliminary analysis. You need to see this. They pulled up holographic displays showing neural scans. These are the cub's brain patterns from 2 weeks ago. Standard predator cognition, instinct-driven, minimal abstract reasoning, no social complexity. The display shifted. These are current scans from the cubs on Deck 7. Look at the prefrontal cortex. Development. Look at the neural pathway. Formation. They're building cognitive infrastructure in real time. This isn't normal development. This is reactive evolution. Caused by what? Vilmuth asked. Security, or more specifically, the presence of security. Thielwen gestured to another display. Their species evolved in hostile environments. Cubs that couldn't develop survival strategies died. But these cubs were rescued, removed from danger, given safety. Their neural development had no pressure, no catalyst. Until Gemma. I gave them a blanket. Gemma said. You gave them a symbol, a physical representation of protection that they could understand and organize around. Their brains recognized it as a survival tool and immediately began developing the cognitive capacity to utilize it. The blanket became the trigger for accelerated development. That's impossible, one of the specialists said. I have 3 degrees in xenopsychology. Thielwen replied. I'm telling you, it's happening. Somehow human intervention has caused explosive cognitive evolution in a species we thought we understood. My comm chirped. Jack Tor, sir. Situation on Deck 7 is escalating. Define escalating. The remaining facility cubs have broken containment. All 43 are en route to the blanket. Also, they're singing. They're what? Singing or making coordinated vocalizations that sound like singing. Sir, it's actually kind of beautiful. I could hear it through the calm, complex harmonies, rising and falling tones. Cubs were communicating in something that resembled music. Veloth stood. This meeting is adjourned. Everyone to Deck 7 now. We moved as a group, administrators and specialists and legal experts all rushing to watch cubs form a civilization. When we arrived, the sight stopped us. All 72 cubs filled the corridor. Original 29 held their defensive positions around the blanket. The new arrivals had formed concentric rings around them, creating a massive living fortress, and they were singing. Different groups maintaining different harmonies, the sound weaving together into something complex and deliberate. They're establishing pack bonds. Thielwyn whispered, through music. They're creating social cohesion with vocalizations. This species doesn't do this. They can't do this. They're doing it, I said. Gemma pushed through our group and approached the cubs. They parted for her, creating a path straight to the blanket. The singing changed, became softer, almost reverent. She knelt by the blanket, the large cub. The leader moved beside her. She placed her hand on its head. I'm sorry I scared you, she said quietly. I didn't understand what this meant to you. The cub made a sound, not the complex vocalizations, something simpler almost like a word. Safe, Thielwyn translated. It said safe. They have language. Thelmoth demanded. Basic, extremely basic, but yes, that was language. Gemma looked at the cubs surrounding her. You feel safe here with the blanket. Multiple cubs responded. Same sound. Safe, then it's yours, Gemma said. I give it to you. The blanket is yours too. Protect. The singing stopped. Every cub went silent, watching, waiting. But Gemma continued, I need to sleep near it sometimes because I feel safe here. Too with you. Can we share? The cubs looked at each other. I swear I saw consultation happen, silent communication through glances and ear positions and tail movements. They were debating. The leader cub turned back to Gemma, made a longer, more complex sound. Share, keeper, guard. Translated, I think there. Agreeing, the keeper sleeps with the blanket and they guard both. Gemma smiled, that works for me. The leader touched its nose to her hand. Then it turned to the other cubs and made an announcement. The sound rippled through the group and suddenly they were reorganizing, creating space, building a formation that surrounded Gemma's door but left access clear. They're adapting the defensive position, I said, making it sustainable. They're planning long-term occupation. Velmuth said, this isn't temporary. They're claiming this space permanently. The station AI chimed in. Chairman Velmuth, legal review is complete based on demonstrated cognitive capacity, social organization, and cultural development. Recommend reclassification of VIN cubs from fauna to provisional sentient status. Also recommend designation of Deck 7 section Delta as protected cultural zone. You want me to give them the corridor? Velmuth said station charter requires accommodation of cultural practices for all sentient species. The cubs have established Deck 7 as culturally significant location. Removal would constitute cultural genocide under interspecies protection. Act. I watched Velmoth's scales shift colors. Sign of extreme stress. If I do this, Velmoth said slowly, if I give them provisional sentience and protected territory, what happens next? Thielwyn stepped forward. They continue. Developing, we study the process. We learn how this happens so we can help other traumatized species. This is unprecedented, Chairman. This is a miracle wrapped in bureaucratic nightmare. And the human, everyone looked at Gemma. She shrugged. I just want them to be okay, and I'd like to sleep in my own bed eventually. Your bed is in their cultural zone, I pointed out. Then I guess I'm living in a cultural zone. The cubs had finished reorganizing. The new formation was remarkable. Efficient, beautiful even. They'd created designated paths, rest areas, and what looked like specific stations for different groups, all in the time it took us to have a conversation. They're planning infrastructure, one of the administrators said. Look, they're allocating space for growth. They're expecting more cubs, Thelwyn said. They're building for expansion. Absolutely not, Velmoth said. We are not turning this station into a cubs colony, as if summoned by the statement. Mycom chirped. Station operations. Security chief, be advised, we're receiving transmission from 6 other stations that rescued Vin cubs. They're all reporting similar behavioral changes. The cubs are requesting transport to Station 41. They want to, quote, join the Sacred Guard. How many cubs? Velmoth asked weakly. Approximately 230. The singing started again, louder this time. The cubs on Deck 7 were celebrating. They knew, somehow they knew their numbers were growing. Gemma looked at me with those human eyes. I really just wanted them to sleep better. You created a species-wide movement, I said. You turned a blanket into the foundation of civilization. You triggered cognitive evolution through bedding. Is that bad? I genuinely don't know anymore. The leader cub approached Chairman. Velmoth sat down in front of them, made a sound that even I could understand meant respect. It's showing difference, Thielwyn said, acknowledging authority, requesting permission. Velmoth looked at the cub, at the blanket, at Gemma, at the 72 cubs who had somehow learned to organize, communicate, and build in less time than it took most species to learn their own names. Provisional sentience granted, Velmoth said finally. Deck 7, Section Delta, designated as protected cultural zone. Gemma, you're officially appointed as cultural liaison. Kesh, you're responsible for security. Thelwyn, you're documenting everything. Can somebody please explain to me how I'm going to justify this to the station council? The cubs erupted in sound, not singing. Celebration. Pure joy translated into noise, and in the middle of it all, Gemma sat by her blanket, surrounded by cubs who treated her like family, looking like someone who just realized their life had become permanently complicated. I'm a wedding planner, she said too. Nobody in particular. I plan table settings. You plan civilizations now, I told her. Congratulations. The cubs pressed closer, protecting their keeper and their sacred rest, and somewhere in the chaos, I realized we were watching history happen because of a blanket. The next week turned my security station into a diplomatic office, and I hated every minute of it. 230 cubs arrived over 6 days, 6. Different transports. 6 different stations, all too happy to ship their fauna problems to us, each group arrived singing that same complex harmony, and each group immediately integrated into what I could no longer pretend wasn't an actual society. Gemma handled it better than anyone expected, better than I did, certainly. She created schedule, rotation systems. For blanket proximity, she designated quiet hours and active hours. She established rules about corridor traffic and hygiene and social behavior. The cubs listened. They organized themselves according to her plans with a discipline that made my security officers jealous. How are you doing this? I asked her on day 4, watching her coordinate 300 cubs like she was arranging wedding guests. It's the same skill set, she said. Checking her data pad, wedding planning is managing expectations, negotiating conflicts, and making sure everyone knows where they're supposed to be. Cubs or humans, it's the same basic principle. Cubs and humans are not the same. They both want to feel important and know they belong somewhere. She made a note. Group 7 needs more enrichment time. They're getting restless. The cubs had divided themselves into 7 groups, not arbitrarily. They'd done it based on, as far as Thielwyn could determine, personality, compatibility, and skill sets. Group 1 handled perimeter security. Group 2 managed internal organization. Group 3 focused on what looked like education, the older cubs teaching younger ones. Group 4 through 7 rotated through various support roles. They'd built a functional society in a corridor. Thielwyn, I said during one of our observation sessions, explained to me how this is possible. I can't, they admitted. Every model we have says this shouldn't work. Cubs this young shouldn't have the cognitive capacity, but they're doing it anyway. My theory is that humans somehow catalyze development in species that respond to social security. That's not a theory, that's speculation. It's all I have. Gemma provided safety. The cubs' brains recognized it as survival advantage and adapted fast. Faster than should be biologically possible. So humans break biology now. Humans break everything. You knew this. Fair point. The real challenge came when the cubs started requesting formal recognition, not just provisional sentience, full legal status as an organized community. They want citizenship, Velmuth asked. During our 7th emergency meeting. They've been sentient for 2 weeks, 11 days, I corrected, and they meet all the requirements: social structure, cultural practices, self-governance, communication systems. They're more organized than some species. We've granted full status. They're children with a government, Thielwyn said, and their cognitive development is accelerating. Last week they had basic language. Yesterday Group 3 started teaching mathematics. What mathematics? Division of resources, spatial calculations, temporal planning, basic mathematics. They're developing academic structure. Velmuth looked exhausted. And this all traces back to one human and one blanket. Correct, I hate this station sometimes. The breakthrough came when Gemma proposed what she called shared custody. She explained it during a meeting with the cubs present, which was surreal but apparently necessary. The blanket is yours, she told the assembled group. You protect it during the day, but at night I need to sleep. So I use it, then in the morning you Take it back, we share responsibility. The cubs consulted, their deliberations had gotten more complex, I could see. Debates happening through gestures and sounds. The leader who we'd started calling first guardian because the cubs needed designation, finally responded. Keeper sleeps, guard watches, sacred. Rest protects both, nearly fluent. Sentences now in 11 days, so you're okay with me sleeping near the blanket? Gemma asked. Keeper is blanket. Is keeper both sacred? Thielwyn grabbed my arm. Did you hear that? They've developed abstract symbolism. Keeper and blanket are synonymous in their cultural framework. She's not just using their sacred object, she is the sacred object. Is that better or worse? I asked. Yes. The arrangement worked. Gemma slept in her quarters with the blanket. The cubs maintained protective formations outside. They rotated shifts. They developed silent communication so they wouldn't disturb her rest. They learned to dim corridor lights during sleep hours. They adapted to her needs, while she adapted to theirs. It's symbiotic, Thelwyn observed. True. Interspecies cooperation. The cubs protect, she organizes. Both benefit. She's teaching them civilization. She's teaching them her version of civilization, which involves a lot of scheduling and matching decorative elements. The cubs had started organizing by color. I didn't want to know why. Station Council finally granted full status on day 13, conditional pending continued development but official. The cubs were legally recognized as the Vin Pack Collective. Their territory was Dec 7 Section Delta. Their cultural liaison was Gemma. Their sacred object was a blanket that had cost approximately 30 credits in the station store. We need to establish protocols, I told Gemma after the council decision. For other rescued species, if humans can trigger this kind of development, we need to understand how and why. I think it's simpler than you're making it. She said they needed someone to care, so I cared. That's all. That's not all. You provided structure, safety, organization. You gave them tools to develop. I gave them a blanket and some attention. You gave them exactly what they needed. When they needed it. That's not simple. That's whatever it is, it's working. The cubs' graduation ceremony happened on day 20. Gemma insisted on it. She'd made sashes color-coded by group. The cubs wore them with obvious pride. Graduation from what? I'd asked when she proposed it. From being lost to being found. From being alone to being pack. It's symbolic. Everything with you is symbolic. I'm a wedding planner. Symbolism is literally my job. The ceremony was brief. Each group received their sashes. First guardian gave a speech that was remarkably coherent for someone who hadn't possessed language 3 weeks ago. They thanked Gemma. They thanked the station. They promised to honor the sacred rest and protect the keeper. Then they sang, the entire pack. 302 cubs singing in perfect harmony, complex melodies that they developed themselves. Cultural music, original composition. 3 weeks, Velmuth said, standing beside me during the ceremony. 3 weeks from feral to this. Human intervention is remarkable, I said. Human intervention is terrifying. What if she'd done something different? What if she'd given them weapons instead of blankets? She gave them exactly what a wedding planner would give, comfort and organization. And we got a civilization. What happens When a human soldier rescues cubs or a human scientist, what do we get then? Good question, horrifying question. The ceremony ended. The cubs returned to their normal activities. Gemma started folding laundry because apparently even cultural liaison had mundane tasks. I watched her fold thermal fabrics while cubs solemnly guarded each item like it might become the next sacred object. She hummed while she worked. The cubs hummed with her. They were learning her songs now. Gemma, I said, do you understand what you've done? I helped some scared kids feel safe. You triggered cognitive evolution. You created a society. You turned blankets into religious artifacts. I did laundry and tried to be nice. She folded another fabric square. Cubs did the rest themselves. I just gave them a starting point. First, Guardian approached with 3 smaller cubs. They carried something, a cloth, hand-stitched, decorated with what looked like careful embroidery. For Keeper, first Guardian said from Pack, thank you for sacred rest. Gemma took the cloth. Her eyes got wet. Humans did that when emotions overwhelmed them. You made this, she asked. Pack makes. Keeper deserves for giving safety. She pressed the cloth to her chest. Thank you, I'll treasure it. The cubs made pleased sounds and returned to their activities. They're developing craft skills now, Thewin said, appearing beside me. Art, creative expression, cultural production. Do you know what this means? That I'll be filing reports forever. That we've witnessed the birth of a civilization. Complete genesis from trauma to culture. In 20 days, because one human thought cubs deserved soft things to sleep on. I pulled up my data pad and started my daily report. Station log, security. Chief Cash, day 20 of the sacred rest. Incident, the cubs are thriving. Population stable at 302. Social structure sophisticated and functional. Cultural development accelerating. No security incidents, no conflicts, no problems except explaining to visiting ships why our corridors are full of singing cubs. Gemma continues liaison duties while planning what she calls cultural appreciation events. I'm afraid to ask what that means. The cubs are enthusiastic. They're always enthusiastic when Gemma proposes anything. The blanket remains in protective custody, still functions as cultural foundation, also still gets used for sleeping. Dual purpose seems to work. Recommend continued observation. Recommend additional human liaison for other rescued species. Recommend I get a vacation because this posting has aged me 6 cycles in 20 days. I closed the report and watched Gemma teach cubs how to fold fitted sheets. They were terrible at it. She was patient. They were determined. You know what the worst part is? I said to Thielwyn. What? This is going to be the template. Every station will want a human now to rescue their traumatized fauna and turn them into civilizations. Is that bad? It's going to be a lot of paperwork. Gemma laughed, surrounded by cubs with half-folded laundry. The pack hummed their harmony. The blanket rested in its honored position, and somewhere in the chaos I realized I wouldn't trade this posting for anything. Because how many people get to watch miracles happen over